Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into the golden sands of the Sahara, a place where the wind whispers tales of forgotten empires and the dunes hide the ghosts of countless journeys. Imagine, if you will, the relentless sun beating down, the shimmering heat rising from the vast, empty expanse, stretching for thousands of miles in every direction. You're standing there, dust on your tongue, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the wind. Now, picture massive camel trains, hundreds strong, lumbering across the seemingly insurmountable barrier, laden with unimaginable wealth. They're heading for cities that have long since been swallowed by the sand, places where ancient traffic jams, yes, traffic jams, were a very real concern. This isn't your usual stroll down memory lane. This is a journey into the heart of a silent, suffocating world. A historical deep dive so tranquil, so utterly devoid of modern distractions, that you probably won't survive this without drifting off. The sheer scale of what we're about to explore, the tenacity of the people who thrived in this unforgiving landscape, it's truly mind-boggling. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're feeling up to it, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always cool to see where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're going to start our adventure not in some bustling port city, but right here, in the vast, intimidating heart of the Sahara Desert. When you picture the Sahara today, you probably envision endless dunes, stark and empty, right? A place of extreme isolation, where life barely clings on. But for millennia, this wasn't just a barren wasteland. It was a dynamic, living, breathing, and surprisingly, often wet, landscape. Think of it less as a static desert and more as a historical shapeshifter. Thousands of years ago, before the relentless march of desertification, large parts of the Sahara were actually green and fertile, dotted with lakes and rivers. This was a place where crocodiles swam, where hippos wallowed, and where early human settlements thrived. You can almost feel the damp earth beneath your feet, hear the buzz of insects, the splash of water. It's a far cry from the arid expanse we know today, isn't it? This green Sahara supported complex ecosystems and, crucially, human populations who were learning the very first lessons in survival against a landscape that was already beginning its slow geological transformation. But as the millennia turned, something changed. The climate began to shift, slowly but inexorably. The monsoons that once nourished these vast plains retreated south, and the life-giving waters receded. What was once savanna began to dry, the lakes shrinking, the rivers turning into dry wadis. This wasn't a sudden cataclysm, but a gradual, relentless process, stretching over thousands of years. Imagine watching your world slowly, day by day, year by year, turning to dust. It's a slow-motion apocalypse for the environment. This environmental transformation had a profound impact on the human populations living there. They had two choices: adapt or migrate. Many did migrate, pushing south towards the fertile lands around the Niger River or north towards the Mediterranean coast. But a hardy few, the ancestors of the people we'll be talking about, chose to stay, to face the desert on its own terms. This period of the Sahara's green past and its subsequent desiccation is a crucial backdrop to understanding the lost cities. These weren't just random settlements. They were born from a deep understanding of, and often a desperate fight against, the desert's changing moods. The very first inhabitants of this drying landscape had to become incredibly resourceful, mastering techniques for finding and preserving water, for hunting the dwindling game, and for building shelters that could withstand the increasingly harsh elements. You can almost feel their determination, their sheer will to survive etched into the ancient rock art found scattered across the Sahara. These engravings show scenes of daily life, of hunting, of rituals, and even of aquatic animals, serving as a silent, sandstone memory of a world that no longer exists. Historians still argue whether the final push to extreme aridity was a smooth continuum or if there were periods of temporary respite and regreening. But regardless, the trend was clear. The Sahara was becoming the formidable barrier we recognize today, setting the stage for the incredible stories of trade and survival that are about to unfold. As the Sahara continued its inexorable march towards aridity, one particular group of people not only adapted but truly began to thrive in what seemed like an impossible environment: the Garamantes. Now, when you imagine a desert civilization, you might picture nomadic tribes, constantly on the move, chasing scarce resources. And while many peoples did adopt that lifestyle, the Garamantes were different. They were, in essence, the ancient world's masters of underground engineering. Their secret weapon, their lifeblood in this parched land, was an ingenious system of subterranean aqueducts known as canets. You can almost feel the cool, damp air as you descend into one of these tunnels, a stark contrast to the burning sun above. It's like stepping into a hidden, underground world, dug by hand, stone by painstaking stone. Think about it. How do you farm in a desert? The sun evaporates surface water almost instantly. The Garamantes solved this by tapping into ancient fossil aquifers, vast underground reservoirs of water that had accumulated during the Sahara's wetter periods, thousands of years before. Imagine digging a series of vertical shafts, sometimes hundreds of feet deep, down to the water table. Then, from the bottom of these shafts, they dig horizontal tunnels, gently sloped, to carry that precious water to the surface, often many miles away, to their fields and settlements. It was an engineering marvel, a testament to incredible foresight and communal effort. Historians still argue whether the technology for canets was developed independently in the Sahara or if it was introduced from Persia, where similar systems existed. Regardless of its origin, the Garamantes perfected it for their unique, unforgiving landscape. It's a bit like building a super-efficient, silent, underground plumbing system that ran solely on gravity. No pumps, no fancy tech, just sheer human ingenuity and muscle power. These canets allowed the Garamantes to establish permanent settlements, to cultivate crops like dates, olives, and even grains, right in the heart of what we now consider an uninhabitable desert. Their capital city, Garama, located in what is now modern-day Libya, was a testament to their success. Picture it, a bustling urban center, complete with impressive stone buildings, temples, and an extensive network of streets, all surrounded by green fields in an otherwise barren landscape. It would have been an astonishing sight for any traveler stumbling upon it. A sudden burst of life and civilization amidst the endless sand. They even had a sophisticated burial culture, building elaborate tombs that stand as silent witnesses to their once thriving society. You can almost hear the chatter of the marketplace, the distant bleating of sheep, the rustle of date palms, all thanks to that constant, cool trickle of water from below. But maintaining these canet systems was an immense undertaking. It required constant vigilance, regular cleaning to prevent silting, and repairs to tunnels that might collapse. Imagine sending workers down into those dark, narrow passages, miles from the surface, with only dim lamps to guide them. It's not exactly a cushy 9-to-5. And it wasn't just about farming. The Garamantes were strategically positioned at a critical crossroads for early Trans-Saharan trade. Even before the widespread use of camels, they facilitated exchange, acting as middlemen between communities to the south and the Roman provinces to the north. They traded in commodities like salt, which was essential for preserving food, and various desert products. You can almost see them haggling in the marketplace, their faces weathered by the sun, their hands perhaps still dusted with the fine sand from the Cannet tunnels. It's a reminder that even in the most challenging environments, human enterprise finds a way. Their existence also posed an interesting challenge to the Romans. While Rome generally preferred not to venture too deep into the Sahara, the Garamantes were a powerful, organized kingdom right on their doorstep. There were periods of conflict and also periods of trade and diplomacy. The Romans were fascinated by them, referring to them in their texts as a powerful, albeit mysterious, desert people. It's funny how even a mighty empire like Rome knew when to draw the line, and that line was often somewhere in the Garamantes' backyard. Their ability to not only survive but to build a complex society in such an extreme environment truly highlights the incredible adaptability of human civilization. For a long time, their story was largely forgotten, buried under the shifting sands, much like their cities themselves. But thanks to archaeological work, their fascinating ingenuity is slowly being uncovered, revealing the true scale of their achievement. While the Garamantes were busy digging their impressive cannets and establishing their desert strongholds, a slow but monumental shift was occurring across the vast expanse of the Sahara. This shift wasn't about water or ingenious engineering. It was about transportation. For millennia, the Sahara, even in its greener phases, was a formidable barrier. Traveling across it on foot was incredibly arduous, fraught with peril, and limited to small groups carrying minimal provisions. Horses and donkeys, while useful, simply weren't built for the long hauls through scorching sand and arid plains. Their water requirements were too high, their hooves ill-suited for the shifting dunes. You can almost feel the blisters forming on your feet, the burning in your lungs, as you imagine trying to cross such a vast distance without the right animal. Then, sometime between the 1st and 3rd centuries CE, everything changed with the widespread introduction of the camel. Specifically, the dromedary camel with its single hump, perfectly adapted to the desert environment. Historians still argue about the precise timeline of its widespread adoption in the Sahara, and whether it was primarily introduced from Arabia via North Africa or if there were earlier, isolated introductions. But one thing is clear. Once the camel arrived and its utility was fully understood, it revolutionized Trans-Saharan travel. It was like suddenly upgrading from a rickety bicycle to a fully loaded, all-terrain desert vehicle. The camel wasn't just an animal. It was a living, breathing, sandproof, heat-resistant, incredibly efficient cargo ship of the desert. Think about what makes the camel so perfectly suited. Its broad, soft feet spread its weight, preventing it from sinking into the sand, unlike a horse's pointed hooves. Its nostrils can close almost completely to keep out sand during a storm, and its long eyelashes act like built-in goggles. But its most famous adaptation, and the one that truly unlocked the Sahara, is its ability to conserve water. A camel can go for days, sometimes even weeks, without drinking, surviving on the moisture in the plants it eats. And when it does find water, it can drink an astonishing amount in a short time, up to 100 liters in just 10 minutes. This isn't because its hump stores water, that's a common misconception. The hump actually stores fat, which can be metabolized for energy and water. But because of a unique set of physiological adaptations, like its oval-shaped red blood cells that can swell significantly without bursting, allowing it to rehydrate rapidly. It's like having an internal, self-replenishing water tank. Imagine being an ancient trader, struggling across the desert with a few donkeys, barely making it from one scarce waterhole to the next. Then you see a camel caravan, moving steadily, gracefully, carrying far more goods with far less fuss. The difference would have been transformative, almost miraculous. Suddenly, goods that were too heavy or too bulky to transport economically became viable. Salt, gold, textiles, foodstuffs, all could now be moved across vast distances with a newfound efficiency. This wasn't just about faster travel. It was about opening up entirely new possibilities for trade, connecting distant regions that had previously been isolated by the sheer immensity of the desert. You can almost hear the soft padding of their hooves on the sand, a rhythm that would come to define the pulse of Trans-Saharan commerce for centuries. The camel also allowed for larger caravans, meaning more goods could be transported at once, increasing safety in numbers against the occasional desert bandit. This animal became the backbone of an economic system that would fuel empires and create immense wealth. Before the camel, the Sahara was a barrier. After the camel, it became a bridge. A very long, hot, dusty bridge, but a bridge nonetheless. The impact was profound, changing not just trade routes but also the political and social structures of the communities living around and within the desert. It paved the way for the rise of powerful West African empires and the flourishing of those very lost cities we're journeying towards. Without the camel, these stories simply wouldn't exist. It's funny to think that such a seemingly simple biological adaptation could reshape an entire continent's history. But there you have it, the ultimate desert workhorse, ready to carry the weight of empires on its back. With the camel firmly established as the undisputed king of desert transport, the stage was set for one of the most remarkable commercial phenomena in ancient history, the Trans-Saharan trade. Before the camel, trade across the desert was sporadic, dangerous, and limited to high-value, low-bulk items. But now, with a reliable beast of burden that could carry hundreds of pounds and endure weeks without water, the possibilities exploded. You can almost feel the ground vibrating beneath your feet as hundreds, even thousands, of camels laden with goods begin to move. A slow-motion river of commerce flowing across the seemingly endless sands. This wasn't just trade. It was the lifeblood connecting entire civilizations, creating a vast economic network that stretched from the shores of the Mediterranean all the way to the lush forests of West Africa. Imagine the sheer audacity of it. Merchants, some from North Africa and the Middle East, others from the burgeoning kingdoms south of the Sahara, made incredible journeys across one of the planet's most hostile environments. Their motivation was simple yet powerful: wealth. The goods moving along these routes were incredibly diverse, catering to the demands of vastly different societies. From the south came the highly sought-after gold, often in the form of gold dust or unworked nuggets, along with slaves, kola nuts, and ivory. These were precious commodities, eagerly desired by the empires of the north. In return, the caravans carried vital goods south: salt, textiles, horses, copper, and manufactured goods like glass beads and finished metalwork. It was a complex exchange, driven by supply and demand across thousands of miles. The establishment of these trade routes wasn't an overnight phenomenon. It evolved over centuries, with various paths opening and closing, shifting in response to political stability, the discovery of new resources, or the rise and fall of dominant empires. Think of it like a constantly evolving internet of ancient commerce, with different servers and nodes coming online and going offline. The core routes, however, generally connected the major trading centers on the southern edge of the Sahara, like those in the Ghana Empire, to the bustling ports and markets on the Mediterranean coast, such as Sijil Massa in Morocco or Gatams in Libya. Historians still argue about the exact volume of trade at its peak, and how much of the gold that reached Europe during the medieval period actually originated from West Africa via these routes. But the consensus is that it was substantial, contributing significantly to the European economy. The traders themselves were a fascinating mix of cultures and backgrounds. Berber nomadic groups, who had an intimate knowledge of the desert, played a crucial role, often acting as guides, protectors, and even merchants themselves. Arab merchants from North Africa also became key players, bringing their sophisticated commercial practices and capital. You'd find a multitude of languages spoken, a cacophony of dialects echoing across the desert camps as deals were struck and goods inspected. It was a true melting pot of cultures, driven by the universal language of commerce. Imagine the stories exchanged around the campfires at night, tales of distant lands, strange customs, and the ever-present dangers of the desert. The very existence of this extensive trade network fundamentally altered the societies it touched. For the West African kingdoms, it brought immense wealth, enabling them to build powerful armies, sophisticated administrations, and impressive cities. Gold from their mines flowed north, and in return they received goods and, crucially, ideas and technology. The introduction of Islam, for example, largely followed these trade routes, brought by merchants and scholars traveling with the caravans. It wasn't just a physical exchange of goods. It was a profound exchange of culture, knowledge, and faith. You can almost see the shift in architectural styles, the adoption of new legal systems, and the spread of literacy as these influences traveled south. It's funny how an unyielding desert, once a barrier, became the very conduit for such profound cultural diffusion. The Sahara, far from isolating these regions, connected them in a way that shaped their destinies for centuries. Of all the goods that traversed the vast and often treacherous Trans-Saharan routes, one commodity, seemingly mundane to our modern sensibilities, held an astonishing amount of power and value: salt. While gold might conjure images of glittering wealth and exotic luxury, salt was the silent, white gold of the desert, an absolutely indispensable item without which life in many parts of West Africa, and indeed much of the ancient world, would have been almost unimaginable. You might be sitting there, perhaps adding a dash of salt to your dinner without a second thought, but try to imagine a world where it was as precious as jewels. Why was salt so incredibly valuable? For starters, it was essential for human and animal survival. In hot climates, especially where strenuous physical labor was common, maintaining electrolyte balance was crucial. Lack of salt led to fatigue, muscle cramps, and eventually, death. More importantly, in an era before refrigeration, salt was the primary method of food preservation. Without it, meat, fish, and many other foodstuffs would spoil quickly, making long-term storage and large-scale sustenance impossible. Imagine trying to feed a burgeoning city or a large army without the ability to preserve food. It simply wouldn't work. Thus, communities far from coastal areas or natural salt deposits were desperate for it. You can almost taste the bland, unpreserved food, feel the desperate craving for that sharp, vital taste. The main sources of this precious commodity in the Sahara were vast salt pans and mines, most notably Tagaza and Tadeni in what is now Mali. These were not pleasant places. They were brutal, remote, and incredibly harsh, often located in the middle of nowhere, hundreds of miles from the nearest vegetation or fresh water. The salt was extracted in large blocks, sometimes weighing as much as a camel could carry, often referred to as bricks or slabs of salt. Imagine chipping away at a massive, solid block of salt under the relentless desert sun, the salt dust irritating your skin and lungs, the shimmering heat making the air dance. It was back-breaking, dangerous work, often carried out by enslaved laborers. The trade in salt was so vital that it sometimes even served as a form of currency. In some regions, a block of salt could be exchanged for an equal weight of gold. Yes, you heard that right, salt for gold, pound for pound. This might sound bizarre to us, but it perfectly illustrates the relative scarcity and demand. While gold was abundant in certain parts of West Africa, salt was scarce. And according to the basic laws of economics, what's scarce and vital commands a high price. This quirky tidbit often surprises people, but it really highlights the ingenuity of ancient economies. Historians still debate the exact ratio of salt to gold at different times and locations, and how much the salt for gold anecdotes are literal or merely illustrative of its high value. But there's no doubt about its fundamental importance. Caravans moving south from the salt mines were a sight to behold. Long lines of camels burdened with these shimmering white blocks, sometimes stacked high, gleaming under the desert sun. For the people awaiting their arrival in the forest zones to the south, the sight of a salt caravan would have been met with immense relief and excitement. It meant survival, flavor, and the ability to preserve their harvests and hunts. The salt trade wasn't just commerce. It was a lifeline, connecting the harsh, arid north with the resource-rich, but salt-poor, south. You can almost hear the excited chatter as the salt blocks are unloaded, each one a promise of sustenance and health. This steady flow of salt underpinned the prosperity of many West African kingdoms, becoming a cornerstone of their economic power and contributing to the very rise of cities that, millennia later, would be lost to the shifting sands. As salt and gold flowed across the Sahara, a powerful and sophisticated empire was rising in West Africa, perfectly positioned to capitalize on this burgeoning trade. The Ghana Empire. Not to be confused with the modern nation of Ghana, which is located much further south. The ancient Ghana Empire flourished in what is now southeastern Mauritania and western Mali. You can almost feel the weight of history underfoot as you imagine this sprawling realm, stretching across vast savannas and semi-desert. Its wealth built not on conquest, but on control of trade. It was the gatekeeper, the toll collector, and the ultimate beneficiary of the Trans-Saharan exchange. The origins of the Ghana Empire are somewhat shrouded in the mists of oral tradition and early Arabic writings, but it's believed to have emerged around the 4th to 6th centuries CE, gradually consolidating power over smaller chiefdoms. Its true golden age, however, spanned from roughly the 8th to the 11th century. The empire's success was largely due to its strategic location, positioned right between the abundant gold fields to the south, particularly the Bambuk goldfields near the Senegal and Falim rivers, and the salt-rich regions of the Sahara to the north. This geographical advantage allowed Ghana to become the primary intermediary in the lucrative gold-salt trade. You can almost see the caravans converging, the bustling markets alive with negotiation, the constant coming and going of merchants, all under the watchful eye of the Ghanaian authorities. The rulers of Ghana, often referred to as the King of Gold, maintained strict control over the gold trade, particularly over the export of gold nuggets. They understood the power of controlling supply. While gold dust was allowed to circulate and be traded freely, the large, pure nuggets were reserved for the king himself. This royal monopoly ensured immense personal wealth for the monarch and provided the financial resources to maintain a powerful army, a sophisticated administration, and a luxurious court. Imagine a ruler whose personal treasury gleamed with more gold than most European monarchs could dream of, all accumulated through careful management of desert commerce. It's a testament to their economic savvy. This unique system of controlling nuggets is a fascinating quirky tidbit, showcasing a distinct approach to wealth management in the ancient world. The capital of Ghana was Kumbi-Sala, a city that, like many of these desert metropolises, has largely faded into the sands of time. However, archaeological excavations and historical accounts suggest it was a dual city. One part for the Muslim merchants who arrived with the caravans, complete with mosques and stone houses, and another, separate section for the traditional Sonic king and his court, built in a more indigenous style. This separation allowed for cultural exchange while maintaining distinct social structures. Historians still argue about the precise layout and demographics of Kumbi-Sala, and whether the two sections were truly distinct or more integrated than previously thought. But the existence of such a sophisticated urban center in the heart of the Sahel is truly remarkable. You can almost hear the call to prayer echoing across the merchant quarter, and the rhythmic drumming from the king's palace, two distinct soundscapes coexisting within one powerful city. The Ghana Empire wasn't just a collection of trading posts. It was a highly organized political entity with a developed system of taxation, justice, and military might. Its cavalry, equipped with horses brought from the north, was formidable and helped maintain order across its vast territories, ensuring the safety of the trade routes that were its lifeblood. The empire's influence extended far beyond its direct control, shaping the economic and political landscape of West Africa for centuries. As you picture the grandeur of Ghana, remember that its power stemmed directly from those arduous camel journeys, from the desperate need for salt in the south and the insatiable desire for gold in the north. It's a powerful illustration of how geography, resources, and clever administration can forge an empire out of dust and determination. As the gold flowed north from the burgeoning Ghana Empire, it had to pass through a series of vital checkpoints, urban magnets that drew in merchants from across the known world. One of the most prominent and historically significant of these northern gateways was Sijil Massa. Located in what is now southeastern Morocco, on the edge of the Tafilalt Oasis, Sijil Massa wasn't just a city. It was the quintessential desert entrepot, a vibrant, sprawling nexus where the dusty caravan routes from the Sahara converged with the established trade networks leading to the Mediterranean and beyond. You can almost feel the chaotic energy, the jostle of crowds, the shouts of vendors, a symphony of commerce in the heart of a dry landscape. Imagine arriving at Sijil Massa after weeks, perhaps months, of arduous travel across the Sahara. For the camel-weary merchants from the south, it would have been a sight for sore eyes. A bustling urban center, surrounded by groves of date palms, a testament to human persistence in an unforgiving land. For merchants from the north, it was the tantalizing gateway to the riches of sub-Saharan Africa, a place where fortunes could be made or lost in the blink of an eye. Sijil Massa emerged as a powerful city in the 8th century, founded by Berber Kharijite Muslims, and quickly grew into a major commercial and cultural center. Its strategic location meant it controlled the northern end of the most important Trans-Saharan routes. The markets of Sijil Massa would have been an intoxicating assault on the senses. Picture piles of gleaming gold dust alongside sacks of precious salt, rolls of fine textiles from North Africa, intricately crafted metalwork, and exotic spices. There would be horses, sometimes brought from distant lands, and, tragically, enslaved people, a grim reality of the era's commerce. The air would be thick with the smell of camel dung, spices, and the sweat of 1,000 travelers. You'd hear a dozen languages being spoken simultaneously: Arabic, Berber dialects, various West African tongues. As deals were struck, prices haggled over, and goods inspected with discerning eyes. It was a place where information flowed as freely as currency, where news from distant empires was exchanged alongside trade goods. Sijil Massa wasn't just a marketplace. It was a sophisticated urban center. It boasted impressive mosques, substantial residential areas, and, crucially, a sophisticated monetary system. Its own gold dinars were widely respected and used throughout the region, a testament to its economic power and stability. This was no temporary encampment. It was a permanent, thriving city that facilitated immense wealth creation. One quirky tidbit: some historical accounts suggest that Sijil Massa was home to early forms of banking and credit, allowing merchants to deposit funds in one place and withdraw them in another, minimizing the risks of carrying large amounts of physical wealth across the desert. Imagine a nascent form of traveler's check centuries before their widespread adoption. Historians still argue about the full extent of its financial sophistication and how much it influenced later European banking practices. For centuries, Sigil Massa held its prominence, waxing and waning with the fortunes of various dynasties and the shifts in trade patterns. It became a powerful independent city-state, and later, a prize contested by various North African empires, including the Almoravids and the Marinids. Its eventual decline, beginning in the 14th century and accelerating in the 17th, was due to a combination of factors. Shifts in trade routes towards new coastal opportunities, political instability, and possibly even environmental changes impacting the oasis itself. Today, the ruins of Sigil Massa lie mostly buried beneath the sand, a silent testament to its former glory. As you envision this once mighty city, bustling with life and commerce, remember that it was the northern anchor for those incredible camel traffic jams, the ultimate destination for the white gold, and the starting point for the manufactured goods that flowed back south, binding the Sahara into a single vast economic zone. While Sigil Massa glittered as a bustling hub of commerce and culture, the source of one of its most vital commodities was a place of unremitting toil and stark desolation: the salt mines of Tagaza. Imagine a landscape so utterly barren, so devoid of life, that it defies imagination. No trees, no shrubs, no even the tiniest blade of grass. Just an endless expanse of shimmering white salt and sand, stretching to a horizon that seems to mock the very idea of life. You can almost feel the stinging dust in your eyes, the dry crack of your lips, the desperate longing for shade that simply doesn't exist. Tagaza, located deep in the heart of the Sahara, in present-day northern Mali, was not a city in the conventional sense. It was more a permanent work camp, a place of extreme isolation and hardship, dedicated solely to the extraction of the massive salt blocks that were the lifeblood of the Trans-Saharan trade. For centuries, from roughly the 12th century onwards, Tagaza was the primary source of rock salt for the powerful West African empires like Mali and Songhai. The very existence of this remote outpost highlights the desperate need for salt in the south. People were willing to endure unimaginable suffering to obtain it. The conditions at Tagaza were brutal. The workers, many of whom were enslaved, lived in dwellings constructed entirely out of salt blocks, baked hard by the relentless sun. Imagine sleeping in a house made of the very substance you're extracting, its walls shimmering in the heat, perhaps even dissolving slowly during the rare rain shower. There was no fresh water to be found locally. It had to be brought by camel, often from hundreds of miles away, making it an incredibly precious commodity. Food, too, was entirely imported. The daily life of a miner would have been a monotonous cycle of chipping away at the salt, enduring the suffocating heat, and rationing meager provisions. It's funny how the material that brought so much prosperity to distant cities created such misery at its source. The process of extraction itself was simple but arduous. Workers would cut huge, rectangular blocks of salt from the vast salt pan. These blocks were surprisingly heavy, often weighing 60 to 80 pounds each, the perfect size for a camel to carry two at a time. Picture the repetitive swing of an axe or pickaxe, the dull thud as salt chunks broke free, the constant fine dust that coated everything and everyone. This was not precision work. It was brute force, pure and simple. The silence of the desert was broken only by the rhythmic sounds of labor and the occasional crack of the salt pan under the intense heat. Historians still argue about the exact number of laborers at any given time and the precise organization of the work, but it's clear that it was a highly regimented and brutal operation. The sheer remoteness of Tagaza made it an almost mythical place in the medieval world. Accounts from travelers like Ibn Battuta, who visited the mines in the 14th century, paint a vivid picture of its desolate nature. He famously wrote that Tagaza had no trees, only sand and salt mines, and that its houses and mosques were built of salt. He also noted the incredible value of the salt, describing how it was cut into slabs and loaded onto camels. This was a place where human endurance was tested to its absolute limits, all for a mineral that, to us, is simply a common condiment. It's a stark reminder of the fundamental necessities that drove ancient economies. The existence of Tagaza, a place of such immense suffering, underscores the vital importance of salt and its central role in the great Trans-Saharan trade network, feeding the demand that sparked those massive camel traffic jams. From the desolate, gleaming white expanse of Tagaza, our journey takes us south, towards a city whose name still resonates with myth and mystery, Timbuktu. Unlike the purely utilitarian mining camp, Timbuktu was a true desert jewel, a city that became synonymous with exotic wealth and profound knowledge. For centuries, its very name conjured images of golden streets and hidden wisdom in the minds of Europeans, though few would ever lay eyes upon it. You can almost feel the dry desert air grow heavier with the weight of ancient texts, the murmur of scholarly debate blending with the distant calls of the marketplace. Timbuktu emerged around the 11th century as a seasonal encampment for Tuareg nomads, strategically located at the bend of the Niger River. This location was key. It was far enough from the river to be safe from seasonal flooding, yet close enough to a navigable waterway to serve as a vital port for riverine trade, connecting the Sahara to the rich agricultural lands and gold fields further south. This unique position, where the desert met the river, allowed it to become a crucial entrepot for Trans-Saharan caravans bringing salt and goods from the north, and riverboats bringing gold, cola nuts, and grain from the south. It was a logistical marvel, a natural bottleneck where two immense trade systems converged. What truly set Timbuktu apart, however, wasn't just its economic prowess, but its incredible intellectual and spiritual vibrancy. Under the successive rule of the Mali and then the Songhai empires, Timbuktu blossomed into a renowned center of Islamic scholarship and learning. Picture this: thousands of scholars, jurists, astronomers, and theologians gathering in its numerous mosques and madrasas, schools. Imagine libraries filled with hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, some of them still being discovered and preserved today. These weren't just religious texts. They covered astronomy, mathematics, medicine, law, history, and philosophy. It was a beacon of intellectual light in a world that often dismissed Africa as a dark continent. The Sankore Mosque, in particular, became the heart of this academic ecosystem. It wasn't just a place of worship. It functioned like an ancient university, with different sections dedicated to various disciplines, attracting students and teachers from across the Islamic world. The sheer volume of knowledge accumulated and disseminated here is astonishing. One quirky tidbit: it's said that Timbuktu boasted more books per capita than many European cities of the same period. Imagine a city where the trade in books was almost as lucrative as the trade in gold. Historians still argue about the exact number of manuscripts Timbuktu held at its peak, with estimates ranging from 300,000 to over 1 million. But there's no doubt about its immense scholarly contribution. The scholars of Timbuktu weren't merely passive recipients of knowledge. They actively contributed to Islamic thought, writing commentaries, developing new legal interpretations, and producing original works. They corresponded with scholars in Cairo, Baghdad, and Cordoba, placing Timbuktu squarely within the global intellectual network of the medieval Islamic world. This flourishing of learning, sustained by the wealth generated from the camel caravans, makes Timbuktu a profound example of how commerce can fuel culture. You can almost smell the parchment, hear the low hum of recitation, the scratch of reed pens on paper. The city's allure, its remoteness, and its reputation for immense wealth fueled European fantasies for centuries, leading to numerous failed expeditions to discover it. But Timbuktu was never truly lost. It was simply a closely guarded secret of the desert, its existence known to those who understood the intricate web of Trans-Saharan trade. As you envision the grandeur of Timbuktu, remember that its intellectual treasures, its bustling markets, and its very existence were all interconnected with the endless procession of camels, loaded with salt and gold, traversing the vast Sahara, forging a vital link between distant worlds. Now that we've glimpsed the bustling cities and the arduous sources of their wealth, let's turn our attention to the very arteries of the Trans-Saharan trade, the Azalai. This wasn't just a handful of camels. The Azalai were massive, organized camel caravans, sometimes numbering in the thousands of animals and hundreds of people, moving across the vast emptiness of the Sahara. You can almost feel the rhythmic sway of the camels beneath you, the fine dust coating your skin, the vast, silent expanse stretching out in every direction. This was organized logistics on an epic scale, a symphony of endurance and careful planning. Imagine a single, long line, stretching for miles across the horizon, a living, breathing train of commerce. Each camel would be laden with goods, typically 2 heavy blocks of salt or bags of gold dust, sometimes weighing as much as 300 pounds in total. They were tethered head to tail, forming a continuous chain, guided by experienced caravan leaders, often Tuareg nomads, who knew every dune, every rock, and every precious waterhole along the route. The sheer scale was breathtaking. Accounts from medieval travelers speak of caravans with thousands of camels, a sight that would have been etched into the memory of anyone who witnessed it. This mainstream historical fact about the size of the Azalai truly underscores the ambition and efficiency of this ancient trade. The organization of an Azalai was incredibly complex. It wasn't simply a matter of pointing camels in a direction and hoping for the best. These were highly structured expeditions, often sponsored by wealthy merchants or even rulers, who invested significant capital in the animals, the goods, and the personnel. There would be a hierarchy. The caravan leader, responsible for navigation and overall safety. The camel handlers, tending to the animals. Guards, protecting against potential raiders, and the merchants themselves, overseeing their precious cargo. Each member had a specific role, essential for the survival and success of the entire enterprise. You can almost hear the low guttural sounds of the camels, the soft commands of the handlers, the quiet murmur of conversation, a stark contrast to the overwhelming silence of the desert. The routes themselves were not random. They followed ancient paths, refined over centuries, connecting known oases and water sources. While direct lines might seem most efficient on a map, the reality of the desert dictated winding paths that took advantage of natural landmarks and reliable wells. These routes were like invisible highways across the sand, known only to those with generations of accumulated knowledge. One quirky tidbit. Some Tuareg guides were said to possess an almost supernatural ability to navigate by the stars, the subtle contours of the dunes, and even the direction of the wind, often relying on senses honed over a lifetime in the desert. It's like having a built-in GPS that runs on millennia of ancestral wisdom. Historians still argue about the exact methods of navigation used in different periods, and how much reliance was placed on written maps versus oral traditions. Life on the Azalai was relentless. Days were spent under the scorching sun, with only the slow, steady pace of the camels. Nights were cool, sometimes surprisingly cold, spent camped in the open, with fires for warmth and cooking, and guards posted to watch for danger. Sleep would have been a luxury, often interrupted by the sounds of the desert or the need to tend to the animals. You can almost taste the dust, feel the grit between your teeth, the exhaustion settling deep into your bones. But despite the hardships, these journeys were undertaken again and again, driven by the immense profits that awaited at either end of the route. The azalai wasn't just a means of transport. It was a way of life, a testament to human resilience and the powerful lure of commerce. These massive camel trains were the true engines of the Trans-Saharan trade, the living embodiment of those very camel traffic jams we're exploring, pushing through the vastness to connect disparate worlds. Guiding those colossal azalai across the seemingly featureless expanse of the Sahara was an art and a science, a skill honed over generations that bordered on the mystical. Forget GPS, forget compasses as we know them. Ancient desert navigation relied on an intimate, almost spiritual connection with the environment. You're out there, surrounded by an endless sea of sand, the horizon a shimmering blur, and yet, the caravan moves with uncanny certainty towards its distant goal. It's like navigating an ocean without a single buoy, relying solely on the stars and the whispers of the wind. The primary method of navigation, especially during the long, clear desert nights, was celestial navigation. The stars were their fixed points, their ancient GPS. The North Star or Polaris would have been crucial for determining direction, but desert guides also used constellations like Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, and the rising and setting points of other prominent stars, to maintain their bearing. Imagine lying on your back at night, the immensity of the cosmos spread above you, and recognizing not just pretty patterns, but a precise map guiding your journey. It's a connection to the universe that most of us have lost in our light-polluted cities. This mainstream historical fact highlights the sophisticated astronomical knowledge held by non-literate societies. During the day, when the sun blotted out the stars, navigators relied on an incredibly keen sense of topography and subtle landmarks. While much of the Sahara appears uniform to the untrained eye, experienced guides could read the landscape like a book. They recognized the slight undulations of the dunes, the patterns of wind-blown sand, the presence of specific rock formations, or even the type of pebbles underfoot. Each of these seemingly insignificant details could signal a specific location or a shift in direction. It's like having a mental 3D map of hundreds of miles of shifting sand. It was a logistical marvel, a natural bottleneck where two immense trade systems converged. What truly set Timbuktu apart, however, wasn't just its economic prowess, but its incredible intellectual and spiritual vibrancy. Under the successive rule of the Mali and then the Songhai empires, Timbuktu blossomed into a renowned center of Islamic scholarship and learning. Picture this: thousands of scholars, jurists, astronomers, and theologians gathering in its numerous mosques and madrasas, schools. Imagine libraries filled with hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, some of them still being discovered and preserved today. These weren't just religious texts. They covered astronomy, mathematics, medicine, law, history, and philosophy. It was a beacon of intellectual light in a world that often dismissed Africa as a dark continent. The Sankore Mosque, in particular, became the heart of this academic ecosystem. It wasn't just a place of worship. It functioned like an ancient university, with different sections dedicated to various disciplines, attracting students and teachers from across the Islamic world. The sheer volume of knowledge accumulated and disseminated here is astonishing. One quirky tidbit: it's said that Timbuktu boasted more books per capita than many European cities of the same period. Imagine a city where the trade in books was almost as lucrative as the trade in gold. Historians still argue about the exact number of manuscripts Timbuktu held at its peak, with estimates ranging from 300,000 to over 1 million. But there's no doubt about its immense scholarly contribution. The scholars of Timbuktu weren't merely passive recipients of knowledge. They actively contributed to Islamic thought, writing commentaries, developing new legal interpretations, and producing original works. They corresponded with scholars in Cairo, Baghdad, and Cordoba, placing Timbuktu squarely within the global intellectual network of the medieval Islamic world. This flourishing of learning, sustained by the wealth generated from the camel caravans, makes Timbuktu a profound example of how commerce can fuel culture. You can almost smell the parchment, hear the low hum of recitation, the scratch of reed pens on paper. The city's allure, its remoteness, and its reputation for immense wealth fueled European fantasies for centuries, leading to numerous failed expeditions to discover it. But Timbuktu was never truly lost. It was simply a closely guarded secret of the desert, its existence known to those who understood the intricate web of Trans-Saharan trade. As you envision the grandeur of Timbuktu, remember that its intellectual treasures, its bustling markets, and its very existence were all interconnected with the endless procession of camels, loaded with salt and gold, traversing the vast Sahara, forging a vital link between distant worlds. Now that we've glimpsed the bustling cities and the arduous sources of their wealth, let's turn our attention to the very arteries of the Trans-Saharan trade, the Azalai. This wasn't just a handful of camels. The Azalai were massive, organized camel caravans, sometimes numbering in the thousands of animals and hundreds of people, moving across the vast emptiness of the Sahara. You can almost feel the rhythmic sway of the camels beneath you, the fine dust coating your skin, the vast, silent expanse stretching out in every direction. This was organized logistics on an epic scale, a symphony of endurance and careful planning. Imagine a single long line, stretching for miles across the horizon, a living, breathing train of commerce. Each camel would be laden with goods, typically 2 heavy blocks of salt or bags of gold dust, sometimes weighing as much as 300 pounds in total. They were tethered head to tail, forming a continuous chain, guided by experienced caravan leaders, often Tuareg nomads, who knew every dune, every rock, and every precious waterhole along the route. The sheer scale was breathtaking. Accounts from medieval travelers speak of caravans with thousands of camels, a sight that would have been etched into the memory of anyone who witnessed it. This mainstream historical fact about the size of the Azalai truly underscores the ambition and efficiency of this ancient trade. The organization of an Azalai was incredibly complex. It wasn't simply a matter of pointing camels in a direction and hoping for the best. These were highly structured expeditions, often sponsored by wealthy merchants or even rulers, who invested significant capital in the animals, the goods, and the personnel. There would be a hierarchy. The caravan leader, responsible for navigation and overall safety. The camel handlers, tending to the animals. Guards, protecting against potential raiders, and the merchants themselves, overseeing their precious cargo. Each member had a specific role, essential for the survival and success of the entire enterprise. You can almost hear the low guttural sounds of the camels, the soft commands of the handlers, the quiet murmur of conversation, a stark contrast to the overwhelming silence of the desert. The routes themselves were not random. They followed ancient paths, refined over centuries, connecting known oases and water sources. While direct lines might seem most efficient on a map, the reality of the desert dictated winding paths that took advantage of natural landmarks and reliable wells. These routes were like invisible highways across the sand, known only to those with generations of accumulated knowledge. One quirky tidbit. Some Tuareg guides were said to possess an almost supernatural ability to navigate by the stars, the subtle contours of the dunes, and even the direction of the wind, often relying on senses honed over a lifetime in the desert. It's like having a built-in GPS that runs on millennia of ancestral wisdom. Historians still argue about the exact methods of navigation used in different periods, and how much reliance was placed on written maps versus oral traditions. Life on the Azalai was relentless. Days were spent under the scorching sun, with only the slow, steady pace of the camels. Nights were cool, sometimes surprisingly cold, spent camped in the open, with fires for warmth and cooking, and guards posted to watch for danger. Sleep would have been a luxury, often interrupted by the sounds of the desert or the need to tend to the animals. You can almost taste the dust, feel the grit between your teeth, the exhaustion settling deep into your bones. But despite the hardships, these journeys were undertaken again and again, driven by the immense profits that awaited at either end of the route. The Azalai wasn't just a means of transport. It was a way of life, a testament to human resilience and the powerful lure of commerce. These massive camel trains were the true engines of the Trans-Saharan trade, the living embodiment of those very camel traffic jams we're exploring, pushing through the vastness to connect disparate worlds. Guiding those colossal Azalai across the seemingly featureless expanse of the Sahara was an art and a science, a skill honed over generations that bordered on the mystical. Forget GPS, forget compasses as we know them. Ancient desert navigation relied on an intimate, almost spiritual connection with the environment. You're out there, surrounded by an endless sea of sand, the horizon a shimmering blur, and yet, the caravan moves with uncanny certainty towards its distant goal. It's like navigating an ocean without a single buoy, relying solely on the stars and the whispers of the wind. The primary method of navigation, especially during the long, clear desert nights, was celestial navigation. The stars were their fixed points, their ancient GPS. The North Star or Polaris would have been crucial for determining direction, but desert guides also used constellations like Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, and the rising and setting points of other prominent stars, to maintain their bearing. Imagine lying on your back at night, the immensity of the cosmos spread above you, and recognizing not just pretty patterns, but a precise map guiding your journey. It's a connection to the universe that most of us have lost in our light-polluted cities. This mainstream historical fact highlights the sophisticated astronomical knowledge held by non-literate societies. During the day, when the sun blotted out the stars, navigators relied on an incredibly keen sense of topography and subtle landmarks. While much of the Sahara appears uniform to the untrained eye, experienced guides could read the landscape like a book. They recognized the slight undulations of the dunes, the patterns of wind-blown sand, the presence of specific rock formations, or even the type of pebbles underfoot. Each of these seemingly insignificant details could signal a specific location or a shift in direction. It's like having a mental 3D map of hundreds of miles of shifting sand. You can almost feel the texture of the sand between your fingers, trying to discern its story. Furthermore, oral tradition and memorized routes were absolutely vital. Knowledge of safe passages, the location of every single well or oasis, and the distances between them, was passed down through generations of guides. These were living maps, walking libraries of desert lore. They knew which wells were reliable, which might dry up, and which were brackish. They understood the seasonal changes in the desert and the best times to travel specific routes. This isn't just knowing facts. It's an ingrained intuition, a sixth sense for survival in the wilderness. One quirky tidbit tells of guides who could even distinguish the direction of travel by the taste of the sand, as different areas had slightly different mineral compositions. Imagine developing a palate for sand. Historians still argue about the extent to which these oral traditions were supplemented by rudimentary written maps or notations, especially after the spread of literacy with Islam. The journey was also governed by the rhythm of the camels themselves. The pace of the caravan was dictated by their slow, steady gait, designed for maximum endurance. The guides knew how long a camel could go without water, how much weight it could carry, and when it needed rest. This symbiotic relationship between human and animal was crucial. You can almost hear the soft padding of their feet, a constant, soothing rhythm against the vast silence. Navigation wasn't just about finding the way. It was about managing resources, anticipating dangers, and making split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death for hundreds of people and thousands of animals. These master navigators, often unheralded, were the silent heroes of the Trans-Saharan trade, ensuring that the lifeblood of empires continued to flow across the world's greatest desert. Even with the marvel of camel endurance and the incredible skill of their navigators, the Trans-Saharan journey was never a leisurely stroll. It was a constant battle against the elements, a test of human and animal limits, where even a slight miscalculation could spell disaster. The desert, for all its majestic beauty, remained an unforgiving adversary, ready to swallow up those who dared to underestimate its power. You can almost feel the burning sun on your skin, the grit of sand between your teeth, and the insidious creep of fear as the landscape itself becomes your enemy. Perhaps the most dramatic and terrifying of these perils were the sandstorms, known locally as haboobs or simoom winds. Imagine a wall of fine, choking dust, hundreds of feet high, suddenly appearing on the horizon, rapidly engulfing everything in its path. Visibility drops to zero, the wind howls like a banshee, and the air becomes thick with abrasive particles, making it impossible to see, difficult to breathe, and agonizing to stand against. Caravans would have to halt, the camels forced to sit, their heads turned away from the onslaught, while people huddled together, covering their faces as best they could. You can almost feel the sand whipping against your exposed skin, finding its way into every crease and crack. These storms could last for hours, even days, disorienting guides, burying supplies, and pushing both humans and animals to their breaking point. But even more insidious than the sudden fury of a sandstorm was the slow, agonizing threat of thirst. While camels are incredibly resilient, they are not immortal, and their water reserves, though vast, are finite. For the human travelers, water was a constant, desperate preoccupation. Water holes could be unexpectedly dry, poisoned, or simply missed due to a navigational error. Imagine running low on water days from the next known well, the sun beating down, your throat dry and cracked, your tongue swollen. The hallucinations, the delirium, the sheer terror of dehydration would have been a very real and ever-present danger. Historians still argue about the frequency of mass fatalities due to thirst on these routes, but anecdotal evidence suggests it was a grim reality for many who attempted the crossing. Beyond the elements, the desert itself presented physical obstacles. Vast stretches of shifting sand dunes could make progress agonizingly slow, forcing caravans to make wide detours. Rocky plateaus and wadis, though offering temporary respite from the sand, presented their own challenges of uneven terrain and hidden dangers. And then there were the extreme temperature fluctuations. While days were scorching, nights could drop to near freezing, requiring careful management of clothing and shelter. Imagine shivering uncontrollably in the dark after enduring a day of oppressive heat, your body struggling to adapt. The constant vigilance required was exhausting. Every shadow could conceal a threat. Every distant shimmer could be a mirage. The very vastness of the desert was psychologically taxing, fostering a profound sense of isolation and vulnerability. It's funny how a landscape so empty can feel so overwhelmingly present, a silent, watchful entity. The successful passage of an azalai was therefore not just a commercial triumph, but a testament to immense courage, meticulous planning, and an unwavering belief in the destination. These dangers weren't just background noise. They were active participants in the drama of the Trans-Saharan trade, shaping the routes, dictating the pace, and forever reminding those who traversed it of the Sahara's ultimate, unyielding power. Beyond the natural perils of sandstorms, thirst, and the sheer unforgiving nature of the Sahara, another significant threat loomed over every Trans-Saharan caravan: bandits and the ever-present specter of lawlessness. While the desert might seem empty, it was far from uninhabited, and not all its denizens were friendly merchants or guides. The vastness that offered freedom of movement also provided perfect cover for those who sought to prey on the rich convoys of gold, salt, and other precious goods. You can almost feel the tension in the air as dusk settles. The guards on edge, scanning the vast, silent horizon for any sign of movement. These weren't necessarily organized armies, though powerful tribes could certainly exact tolls or protection money. More often, they were smaller, opportunistic groups of raiders, often dispossessed nomads or desperate individuals, who understood the desert intimately and knew the rhythms and vulnerabilities of the caravans. They would strike swiftly, often at isolated points, aiming to overpower guards, snatch valuable cargo, and disappear back into the dunes as quickly as they appeared. Imagine the sudden chaos. Shouts, the clang of metal, the frantic scrambling of camels, and the desperate struggle for survival. This mainstream historical fact of banditry was a constant threat, forcing caravans to adopt defensive strategies. Caravan leaders and merchants understood this risk implicitly. Security was paramount. Large caravans like the Azalai offered a degree of safety in numbers. The sheer size of 1,000 camel train, with hundreds of armed men accompanying it, often served as a deterrent. However, smaller, more vulnerable groups were always at risk. Many caravans would also employ experienced guards, often from the same nomadic groups who knew the terrain and possessed formidable fighting skills. These guards were not just deterrents. They were often the first line of defense in a sudden ambush. You can almost hear the nervous whispers among the travelers, the quiet cocking of weapons, the constant, low hum of anxiety that permeated the journey. But what about justice in such a vast, ungoverned space? The Sahara largely operated outside the formal legal frameworks of the empires it connected. Instead, a complex system of unwritten laws and tribal customs often dictated how disputes were settled and how transgressions were punished. Caravan leaders might have significant authority, acting as judge and jury in minor disputes, relying on established traditions and respect. For more serious crimes, particularly banditry, the consequences could be swift and brutal, often involving retaliatory raids or collective punishment against the responsible group. It was a harsh, frontier justice, driven by the need to maintain order and deter future attacks. This quirky tidbit about unwritten desert justice highlights the unique social structures that emerged in this environment. Historians still argue about the precise balance between formal legal structures that extended into the desert from the empires and these more informal, localized systems of justice. The threat of banditry also influenced the routes taken by caravans. Safer, more established paths might be preferred over shorter, but riskier alternatives. This isn't a city that conjures images of towering stone structures or grand palaces, but rather a sprawling, organic metropolis built primarily of mud brick, intricately woven into the landscape of the Niger inland delta. You can almost feel the soft, damp earth underfoot, a stark contrast to the gritty sand of the desert, and hear the gentle lapping of the river that gave it life. Gengino is perhaps one of the most fascinating archaeological sites in West Africa, offering unique insights into pre-colonial urbanism. Located just southeast of the modern city of Gen in Mali, it was founded as early as 250 BCE, making it one of the oldest cities in sub-Saharan Africa. What's truly remarkable is that Gengino developed its complex urban structure without external influence, long before the major impact of trans-Saharan trade or the arrival of Islam. This mainstream historical fact challenges earlier notions that complex societies in West Africa only emerged as a result of external contact. It demonstrates an independent trajectory of urban development. Imagine a city without walls, spreading organically across a series of low mounds during the annual flood season of the Niger River. The inhabitants were primarily fishermen, farmers, and skilled artisans. They cultivated rice, millet, and sorghum in the fertile floodplains, and fished the abundant waters of the Niger. The city itself was a dense cluster of mud brick houses, often multi-story, with flat roofs that provided extra living space or storage. You can almost smell the earth, the cooking fires, and the distinctive scent of the river. The archaeological evidence suggests a highly organized society, capable of sustaining a large population, perhaps as many as 50,000 people at its peak around 900 CE. Gengino wasn't isolated, however. It was a crucial node in a regional trade network, connecting the rich resources of the Niger inland delta with the drylands to the north and the forest zones to the south. While it wasn't directly on the Trans-Saharan routes in the same way as Timbuktu, its position on the Niger River made it a vital feeder point. Goods like dried fish, rice, iron tools, and pottery from Gengino would have moved north by riverboat, eventually finding their way onto camel caravans heading for the Sahara. In return, items like salt, copper, and perhaps even some textiles from the north would have flowed south. This indirect connection to the broader Trans-Saharan network highlights the interconnectedness of seemingly disparate regions. One quirky tidbit about Gengino is the discovery of numerous terracotta figurines, often depicting humans and animals, which provide fascinating clues about their spiritual beliefs and daily life. Some of these figurines show signs of ritualistic breaking, suggesting they might have been used in ceremonies or for healing. Imagine the hands that molded that clay centuries ago, imbuing it with meaning. Historians still argue about the exact social structure of Gengino and whether it had a centralized political authority or operated as a more decentralized collection of communities. Regardless, its longevity and prosperity demonstrate a highly adaptable and resilient society. Gengino ultimately declined, likely due to a combination of environmental changes, shifts in trade patterns, and the rise of new regional powers, its mud brick structures slowly dissolving back into the earth from which they came, leaving behind only the rich archaeological record to tell its story. From the intricate mud brick urbanism of Gengino, let's travel northwest, deeper into the heart of the ancient Ghana Empire, to its legendary capital, Kumbi-Sala. Unlike Timbuktu's enduring reputation, Kumbi-Sale's very existence was long debated by scholars, sometimes dismissed as more myth than reality. However, archaeological work, particularly in the mid-20th century, finally began to uncover the physical evidence of this powerful city, validating the historical accounts found in medieval Arabic texts. You can almost feel the dry, dusty air of a place where empires once rose and fell, now largely silent save for the whispers of the wind. Kumbi-Sala, which flourished from the 9th to the 11th centuries, was not a single, sprawling urban center in the European style. Rather, it was a fascinating dual city, a testament to the distinct cultural and economic forces at play in the Ghana Empire. This mainstream historical fact often surprises those used to more homogeneous city layouts. Imagine two distinct urban areas, separated by a few miles of semi-desert, one for the Sonic King and his traditional court, and another for the bustling community of Muslim merchants. This arrangement allowed for a vibrant interface between indigenous African traditions and the incoming Islamic influences, all while maintaining a degree of separation. The Muslim quarter was the commercial heart, teeming with Trans-Saharan traders. Here, you would have found stone houses, a dozen mosques, and bustling markets where gold, salt, copper, textiles, and other goods were exchanged. The architecture, as described by the 11th century Andalusian geographer al-Bakri, would have resembled towns in North Africa or Spain, reflecting the cultural exchange driven by commerce. You can almost hear the rhythmic calls of the muezzin echoing across the rooftops, blending with the haggling of merchants and the rhythmic sounds of camels being loaded and unloaded. This was the vibrant hub where the vast wealth of the Ghana Empire was accumulated and distributed. A few miles away, connected by a road, lay the royal quarter, the residence of the King of Ghana and his retinue. This part of the city was characterized by more traditional African architecture, likely grand compounds of mud brick and thatch, surrounded by defensive palisades. The king's palace was said to be an impressive structure, and within it, rituals and ceremonies unique to the Sonic people would have been performed. This separation allowed the king to maintain his traditional authority and religious practices, while still benefiting immensely from the foreign trade conducted in the other quarter. It's funny how an empire managed to embrace two distinct cultural spheres within its very capital. A strategic diplomatic move as much as a practical one. Kumbi Saleh's strategic importance lay in its control over the gold trade from the Bambuk and Boer goldfields to the south. The King of Ghana derived immense wealth from taxes levied on all goods entering and leaving his domain, particularly on the gold. This wealth allowed him to field a powerful army, including a significant cavalry, which maintained order and protected the trade routes across his vast empire. One quirky tidbit mentioned by al-Bakri is the king's impressive display of wealth during court sessions. He would sit in audience wearing magnificent gold ornaments, surrounded by his royal dogs with gold collars. Imagine the sheer opulence designed to impress visiting dignitaries and underscore his formidable power. Historians still argue about the exact population figures for Kumbi Saleh at its peak, and how much economic activity truly occurred within the royal quarter versus the merchant quarter. The decline of Kumbi Saleh, and by extension the Ghana Empire, was complex. It was likely influenced by environmental changes, such as increasing desertification, which put pressure on agricultural lands and water resources. More significantly, military pressure from the Almoravids, a powerful Berber Islamic dynasty from North Africa, led to a period of conflict and, eventually, the weakening and fragmentation of the empire in the 11th and 12th centuries. Though never truly lost in the way some cities were, Kumbi Saleh gradually faded into history, its once bustling quarters returning to the embrace of the desert, leaving behind only tantalizing ruins for archaeologists to piece together its remarkable story. As the Ghana Empire, with its dual capital of Kumbi Saleh, began its slow, inevitable decline, another fascinating civilization, the Garamantes, also faced its end, though for reasons often distinct from the political turmoil affecting their southern counterparts. Remember those ingenious masters of underground engineering, the people who built cities like Garama in the heart of the Libyan desert using elaborate cannon systems? Their story serves as a poignant reminder that even the most innovative adaptations to extreme environments can ultimately be undone by the relentless march of time, climate, and changing human priorities. You can almost feel the slow, creeping despair as the lifeblood of a civilization gradually begins to dry up. The heyday of the Garamantes spanned from roughly 500 BCE to 600 CE, during which they built a sophisticated and prosperous kingdom. Accounts vary, but some claim he brought 80 to 100 camels, each laden with hundreds of pounds of gold dust. Other sources suggest as many as 12,000 enslaved people, each carrying a 4-pound gold bar. Imagine the shimmering spectacle, a river of gold flowing across the sand dunes, glinting under the desert sun. It was an absolute spectacle of opulence designed to leave no doubt about Mali's immense riches. The impact of this Hajj was immediate and profound, particularly in the cities he visited, such as Cairo. Mansa Musa was incredibly generous, distributing vast amounts of gold to the poor and exchanging it with local merchants. While his generosity was celebrated, it had an unexpected economic consequence. It reportedly caused a gold market crash in Cairo, devaluing the metal there for years due to the sudden influx. Imagine the shock of the local economy, disrupted by one man's pilgrimage. This quirky tidbit highlights the sheer quantity of wealth he commanded and its tangible, if unintended, global economic impact. Historians still argue about the precise extent and duration of this gold devaluation, and whether it was truly a crash or more of a significant market fluctuation. Beyond the economic ripple, Mansa Musa's Hajj had a significant impact on European perceptions of Africa. Before his pilgrimage, European knowledge of sub-Saharan Africa was vague and often based on unreliable hearsay. But reports of Mansa Musa's incredible wealth, carried back by merchants and travelers, suddenly brought West Africa into the European consciousness as a land of unimaginable riches. This was explicitly depicted on the 1375 Catalan Atlas, a renowned medieval map that shows Mansa Musa enthroned, holding a gold nugget, clearly identifying him as the ruler of a wealthy gold-producing region. The pilgrimage fostered stronger diplomatic and economic ties between Mali and the wider Islamic world. Scholars, architects, and merchants were encouraged to travel to Mali, enriching cities like Timbuktu and Gao with new ideas and building projects. The construction of the famous Djinguiba Mosque in Timbuktu, for example, is attributed to an architect who traveled with Mansa Musa from Mecca. The Hajj of Mansa Musa wasn't just a religious journey. It was a grand strategic maneuver that cemented Mali's place as a global power, demonstrating how the wealth generated by trans-Saharan trade could project influence far beyond the desert's sandy confines. It was a golden moment in the history of the Sahara, illuminating the incredible power and sophistication that could emerge from its heart.